I'm Bryce Cool.
I'm Henry Shelley.
And I'm Chris Connerby.
And this is Crash Cool.
America entered the Second World War on December 7th, 1941, when the American fleet at Pearl Harbor was bombed by the Japanese. World War II for the U.S. only lasted about 6 years, but it cost us almost $4,110 billion in today's money. The war also cost us over 290,000 American soldiers' lives.
So, what is propaganda?
Propaganda is defined as information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or point of view. Propaganda has been used through history in many places and for a wide variety of reasons.
Even in modern day, we see propaganda all the freaking time.
For example, we see it on anti-tobacco use for teen ads. American World War II propaganda is still a big deal because it helped to define many of our country's ideologies.
Why was propaganda so effective in the 1940s during World War II? So this idea brings us to the ideology of American security. According to the National World War II Museum, the government manipulated the idea of nationalism and used it to their advantage to convince citizens that it wouldn't be as difficult as it was in reality, and got more soldiers recruited by doing so. They also used posters a lot during this time to get more people involved and support the cause of the war effort.
Oh, hey. Well, the government made the posters to make the Americans feel like they were responsible for serving their country in a positive way.
Americans supported the war by buying war bonds, joining the army, or having women take care of families on the home front.
Oh, didn't see you there. According to the GILDER LEHRMAN Institute of American History, World War II propaganda was so effective in America because it was accessible, it was easy for Americans to get, and it was just very persuasive. Let's go to Henry with fan mail.
Welcome to fan mail. Dear Brett. Wait, this is not my mail.
Dear Bryce, who did the World War II propaganda target? According to William Byrd and Harry Rubenstein from the GILDER LEHRMAN Institute of American History, the posters targeted young men, women, and children. The government used all kinds of ways to get the people's attention and involvement in the war. Radio broadcasts were used to encourage men to get drafted, women to join the workforce, and for all to buy war bonds. It was imperative to have the American people behind the war effort. Victory over the Axis was not a given, and certainly would not be without the wholehearted support of all men, women, and children.
Oh, this is fan mail number 2. Let's see. Dear Henry, what were the main reasons America used propaganda during World War II?
Propaganda was used by the Americans to motivate its citizens. After World War I, no one wanted to see more American young men die in a war across the world. So propaganda helped Americans achieve their nationalism by using forms of media through radios and posters.
Wow, thanks Bryce and Henry for that awesome fan mail you got there.
No problem, man. We're just trying to keep our viewers educated.
Alright, well let's go to the thought bubble and find out a little bit more about American security and ideologies during World War II. As you can see by now, propaganda in the 1940s during World War II is very important, especially for young soldiers who were targeted primarily with the propaganda. As you can see in this, Uncle Sam wants you to join the military. But what about women? In this We Can Do It poster is a good example of how women's roles increased during the 1940s. Before the 1940s, generally your average woman would either stay at home and take care of her family and wouldn't work factory jobs, but during World War II, the propaganda helped increase a woman's roles in society. They worked in factories and they helped to mobilize our country during the Second World War, and they took over their men's jobs while they were over fighting overseas. Let's go to Bryce with more info.
So, who was the mastermind behind the propaganda? In 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt created the Office of War Information. This mid-level agency joined a host of other wartime agencies, including the War and State Departments, in the dissemination of war information and propaganda. In 1942, the Office of War Information was created to both craft and disseminate the government's message. This propaganda campaign included specific goals and strategies, according to the National World War II Museum. At first, the government was reluctant to engage in propaganda campaigns, but pressure from the media, the business sector, and advertisers who wanted direction persuaded the government to take an action role, according to Navarro from Stanford. The U.S. government produced posters, pamphlets, newsreels, radio shows, and movies, all designed to create a public that was 100% behind the war effort, according to National World War II Museum. Now it's time for the shock pen.
How did posters represent the war taking place outside of the United States borders?
Well, they were overhyped and not factual.
Ow!
That's wrong, Bryce.
Ow!
At times, the posters were misleading the American people and projecting negative view of the war abroad. In other instances, the posters and advertisements were politically correct. Chris, which superhero was used as propaganda during the 1940s to promote American security?
Was it Superman?
Yes!
The Superman comic number 17 is a great example of a primary source of propaganda during World War II. The comic book was written by Seigel, Jerry, and Ray Fred. The comic book is a good source of propaganda because it is created in 1942 during the U.S. propaganda boom. The author of the comic, Jerry Seigel, knew that propaganda was a way to get citizens to mobilize during the war and help with the war effort. So, Henry, how did the United States respond to the propaganda during World War II?
42?
No, that's completely wrong.
The United States spent nearly $300 billion to fight the Axis powers in supporting our allies. That's nearly $4 billion in today's money. To help support this fund, the United States needed all the help they could get from its citizens. The United States responded positively to the propaganda. Over 85 million Americans spent around $185 billion on war bonds to help fund the war. People were brought closer together during the tough times, and everyone investing, and war bonds really made a difference in the war. The people who invested and bought war bonds would receive money 10 years after the bond was bought. So if you bought a large amount of bonds, you would receive a larger profit.
All in all, the propaganda posters used during World War II helped to mobilize the United States as a strong nation. The posters were an ideal agent for making war aims the personal mission of every citizen. Whether created by government or corporations, the posters conveyed social, economic, and political ideas through imagery. This made the nation feel more safe and secure, and allowed the women to be more brave and work hard in place of their husbands for their families. According to the National World War II Museum, these posters with pictures of fists, muscles, tools, and artillery convoy Americans straight. Patriotic colors of red, white, and blue predominate as national symbols and heroes appealing to patriotism. The posters also confront the viewer with the frightening stakes of the war and its human cost. Dark earthen colors appear in portrayals of imperiled citizens as well as dead and wounded soldiers. According to Lori Steffens from Herbert Hoover Presidential Library and Museum. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Crash Course. Be sure to like this video and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time, folks.
It breaks his heart seeing foreign cars